Good morning and welcome to you all, members and friends of the German-Danish Chamber of Commerce. And thank you for tuning in this Tuesday morning. My name is Andreas Wenzel. I'm the CEO of the German-Danish Chamber of Commerce. As some of you may know, this interview format, A Coffee With, is an oldie but goldie, and that's why we're happy to bring it live again. So I'm at our studio in Copenhagen today, together with our guest Heidi Andersen, who is a managing partner and executive coach at Living Institute, a company working with diversity management in both Denmark and Germany. And she's not only that, but she's also an author of a book she wrote about diversity intelligence, which is very interesting to have a read through if you're interested in this topic, or you might be interested after our coffee with today. Our aim today is to shed a light on the importance of diversity within the workplace and how effective diversity management, diversity intelligence, can significantly benefit your company. Heidi, welcome to our studio. Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. To kick things off, could you briefly introduce yourself and share a bit about your background?
Yes, my name is Heidi Andersen, and that's not a coincidence. My first name is Heidi because my father was German, and my family name is Andersen, which is super Danish. So my parents, my mother is Danish and my father is German, from Geislingen in Baden-Württemberg. So I have this Swedish ring to my German, I know. But I grew up in Denmark with lovely holidays in southern Germany. And that is a long story, and perhaps that's why I'm sitting here today. But also, if you look at it professionally, I was head of corporate identity at Bang & Olufsen.
Yeah.
A global company producing audio and visual. Yeah. And in those years, I realized that having a global mindset is super important for companies in order to succeed in their global strategies and goals. And I could also see that it was easy for me to navigate between cultures, but it's not easy for everyone. So I founded Living Institute 20 years ago, and we've been working with diversity intelligence or cultural intelligence ever since.
Yeah, super. Thank you so much, Heidi, for that brief introduction. Now, for our audience that might not necessarily be familiar with the topic of diversity management or diversity intelligence, could you explain what you understand about it? What is diversity management?
Well, in short, how do you define diversity intelligence? And we always say, you know, you're diversity intelligent if you can produce amazing results with people who are very different from yourself. So it's basically about making sure that you don't reproduce the past, that you don't have people like you around you. You should have people who are different from you. And if that works by also having a culture of inclusion, because diversity without inclusion is a terrible idea. So a diversity inclusive environment makes you more productive and more innovative, and has a huge bottom line effect as well. So that's why you should do it.
Yeah, thanks for this great overview. And to our live audience, I can say that Heidi and I have agreed that you can ask questions during the interview. So please feel free to use the chat function here in Zoom if you have any question, and we will try to answer the questions along the way or at the end of our talk. But now let's delve into the benefits of diversity management.
Yes.
You briefly mentioned the concept, Heidi, but why is it essential for companies, and can it positively impact on a company's performance and bottom line?
Yes, definitely. And not because I say so, but because we see one study after the other showing that it has this bottom line effect. In December, a study came out from McKinsey showing that if you divide the companies into 4 quartiles, where you put those who are most diverse in the top quartile, there is a 39% likelihood for you to outperform the companies in the lowest quartile. So a 39% likelihood of outcompeting your competitors is something that should be or is attractive for many companies. And that's why we are pretty busy, because companies want to achieve that extra bottom line effect coming from mastering diversity.
And how do you explain this kind of outperformance through diversity? What are the reasons behind it?
Those companies are more innovative because what you can see is when you have different perspectives around the table, you will come up with better solutions, more sustainable and more sustainable solutions in your company. Also, if you have diversity and it's clear for people when they visit your website, for example, talents would want to work for you. Whereas we can see young talents don't want to work in companies where there's no diversity at all. They actually have that as one of the most important parameters when they choose where to work. So you can attract the talents and you can become more innovative, and that affects the bottom line.
And future-oriented, not necessarily reproducing the past by working together and debating together with people who think alike.
Exactly.
And who are like you.
Hardly need to say anything. You can just say, let's do like we did last year. Yes, let's do that. And you will get what you got last year.
Understand. Yes. But interesting to see that the benefits are measurable and of quite a significance. So the benefits are clear, but companies may also face challenges in introducing and implementing effective diversity management. What are some of the common challenges and how can business overcome them?
What we see we do a lot of data. We base everything we do on data and research, and we do inclusion surveys as well. And basing your initiatives on data is crucial for you to succeed. When you do an inclusion survey, where you look at the perception gaps between the different identity groups in your company, you will see that the minorities will probably not be as happy every morning when they go to work. Women may tend to leave the companies at a very large number these years after COVID-19. So you see some very clear tendencies within your company that you need to address. But if you are guessing, thinking maybe if we implement these initiatives, that might help, and it's simply guessing and it's trial by error, you will not reach any of the goals you might have set out for this.
I would be interested to hear from you, what are the most common mistakes companies make when implementing diversity management? You earlier referred to, say, diversity is nothing without inclusion. What are the most common kind of like mistakes?
There are three perhaps very big mistakes. One is if top management is not 100% committed and engaged. So everybody can look at top management saying, no, they don't really mean it. So we don't need to change any behaviors or anything. Another thing is when you have the trial and error approach, you will fail. So you're not basing it on data. And I'd say the last one would be not involving leadership, all leadership layers in the organization. So you won't, what we're talking about is basically a cultural transformation. You need to do something different. You need to change your culture. So you need everybody on board, especially the ones in power.
And the notion of diversity does not work without inclusion. What does it mean? What is diversity without inclusion?
If you have a culture where people who belong to the minority say that they don't feel they belong, that they don't feel safe, psychologically safe, they cover, they try to look like the majority, but they cannot really fool anyone. They are different from the majority. If they feel that they are not invited to the party, so to speak, it's a bad idea to have minorities. And minorities are often those who are diverse, who are the ones who make your company diverse. So we have a lot of examples where we can see that when we do our inclusion surveys, that those who belong to the minority groups are leaving the company within the next 1 to 2 years.
Because of a lack of inclusion.
Because
so
of
we
the
have a diverse company, but no inclusion. That's not a good idea.
No, and yes, and we can also see that most leaders or managers have A and B teams without knowing it. So the minorities usually belong to the B teams, and that means they are not getting the best and most interesting tasks. They are not being involved in the decision-making processes. They are left, as B teams are, outside the room all the time, where the A teams are having a ball, so to speak. So when you have the A teams and B teams, you know there's something wrong, and you need to combine them and make them one super team.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point. So having spoken about challenges and mistakes, let's delve into best practices and what are some steps that businesses can take to embrace diversity and inclusion effectively. So if, for instance, I want to do something about it, how do I go about it, and what are the steps to be taken?
I think the first one would be to find out what is the state of the union, what is going on inside your company. So field an inclusion survey, and an inclusion survey is a perception gap analysis. So find out who feels every morning when they go to work, they have a tailwind. The door opens automatically and they are going up all the stairs with no problems. Or who feel that they have a headwind. It's tough for them to get in. It's not, they don't feel super creative when they're inside and so on. If you can see who are the identity groups in your company who feel that they belong and who feel they don't belong, and then start implementing initiatives that makes everybody aware that you have these issues and that you need to change behaviors and do some, it can be due to unconscious biases, for example, and that there is a resistance in the organization against these initiatives. So find out, see where are these the reasons behind that you have these trouble creating and culture of inclusion, and then start working on them.
Speaking about unconscious bias, that it's a concept that might not necessarily be known for all of our viewers. Could you briefly elaborate what you mean by that?
Yes, if you have a brain, you have unconscious bias. That's one. So we all have it. Of course, myself included. I have a lot of biases, but the biases come from the brain saving energy, because the brain, we have been training our brains to realize, to look at the world as it is, which means we have a lot of preconceptions of what is right and what is wrong. If I say you should think of a CEO in a large global company, you will probably think it's a man, because you've seen that so many CEOs in large companies are men. So basically, the brain reproduces the past and saves energy that way. But we need to question our perceptions and say, okay, can we do something different? Could it be, can we have a female CEO, or, and so on. And you see at the moment that many companies are questioning their presumptions and are actually acting differently.
So you need to open the doors and open the minds to allow to view the world from different perspectives, and not only assume according to your own experiences and to the past that you have experienced.
Exactly.
You earlier spoke about the importance of data.
Yes.
When implementing successful diversity intelligence initiatives. How does it work? How can one measure inclusion and diversity in a company, and how can businesses track and measure the impact of their diversity management efforts going along? Because I think that's a very important point, because otherwise we are just guessing and we are in the trial and error kind of like approach. But how does it actually work to work and to include data in that calculation?
Yeah, you have to, of course, measure you have to make an analysis with hard data and soft data. You need to know how many of a certain identity group do we have, how many women do we have in top management and so on. So there's hard data and soft data. So we have X number of women. How do they perceive going to it? How do they feel basically about being in top management or in the higher layers of management and so on. And when you look at the soft data and the hard data, you get a very clear picture of how inclusive a company is. And you can see what units are falling behind, for example. And then you can focus on those areas and skip all the initiatives that wouldn't have an effect anyway. So you can kind of laser sharp implement solutions that will move the needle.
To go forward,
Yes.
When speaking about diversity management, we often refer to the representation of women, which is obviously a very important element of diversity management, but it might not be the only one. What other kind of like minority groups, concepts, population groups can I as a company address, or what could be useful to kind of like include and to view these different groups accordingly?
Yes, I think the short answer would be that you should mirror the societies you work in or you have activities in. But one of the things we see at the moment that's really making a lot of fuss in this area is that EU have launched a directive here recently saying that listed companies with more than 250 employees must have at least 33% women or underrepresented gender in the higher management levels, or 40% of the underrepresented gender at the boards. And this has to be implemented by July 26. So we have 17 months to create a leadership teams with those numbers, and there will be a penalty if you don't reach those goals. So 17 months from now, 33% in the leadership levels or 40% at the board is tough numbers to reach in such a short
time, definitely.
So that's focusing on gender. But there are so many ways you can differ from the majority. One of the things we're looking at the moment is neurodiversity. What does it mean if your brain is working differently than others, and how can you benefit from some of the diverse thinking employees? And all companies have diverse brains inside their companies. So looking at how do our brains work is one of the interesting things to look at the moment. And then of course cultural backgrounds.
Definitely, with labor migration and the importance of recruiting labor from abroad due to the shortage of labor, both in Denmark and Germany.
So cultural intelligence is super important to look at. At the moment we do a lot of cultural intelligence training because it's kind of, it has been big back in the days when I founded Living Institute. And then it went down a bit because we were focusing on gender and ethnicity and so on. But now cultural intelligence is coming back as one of the initiatives that are being looked at in the companies at the moment.
And age groups, for example, does this play a role? Is this also part of diversity?
A very big role. Gender or generation, diversity is one of the big things as well, because we can see that we need to attract younger talents as well. How do we do that if we are a company that's been there for hundreds of years? So
okay, thank you. Again, I would like to invite our audience to address questions if they have to Heidi. But take your time and type them in. We'll have some 8 to 10 minutes to go still. Heidi, I'd like to turn to another topic that is very much at the core of German-Danish business relations and very much also at the core of discussions at the German-Danish Chamber of Commerce. That's obviously cultural differences between Denmark and Germany.
Yes.
And how do we do together? And with you as an expert in diversity and with your double background as being Danish as well as being German, cross-cultural topics between Denmark and Germany, do they play a role in your work? And
Yes.
what can you contribute to that discussion?
Yeah, right now I have two of my colleagues are in Frankfurt, working with Heraeus, one of the larger German companies, and they are also they are working with the top management team today. Yesterday was the lower management teams, and they are also talking about how do we have a global mindset? How do we make sure that we can navigate in cultural differences all over the world? And that's one of the topics we talk about when we do inclusive leadership training, that a part of being an inclusive leader is to understand that there are cultural differences when you work globally. So, and when you look at Germany and Denmark, it's funny, we are neighbors, and still there's so many differences in our cultural DNA, you could say. And some of them are the classic ones with the time perception, the hierarchies, and also the formalities and so on, which really differ. And they do make a difference when we work together. So, but what we really enjoy is when we are being challenged of bridging the differences between Germans and Danes, because there's so much to gain from being different in the way we are.
Yeah.
We were doing a workshop last week for expats who had moved to Denmark, and there was a German spouse who said now she had lived as an expat in the US and in China, but the biggest culture shock she had was when she moved to Denmark and lived here. She couldn't crack the code to Danishness, so to speak.
Yeah.
So she was still struggling, and she had no idea why everything went wrong whenever she wanted to do things.
Yeah. What are the points, according to your observation, that we should be specifically aware between Danish and German culture doing business? What would be your advice for Danish or German companies, respectively, being working in the environment between Denmark and Germany? What's kind of like the most important thing to work with?
If you force me to pick one, I'd say hierarchies.
Okay.
Because it's so extremely low in Denmark. We are, when you look to social science, you will find that we have the lowest hierarchy in the world. We are super egalitarian, is what you call it. And this is not the case in Germany. On the contrary, it's actually important to tell people if you do have a title, if you are an academic and so on, and the Danes will always be looking at you saying, is that really necessary to tell that? So I'd say that's one of the and it'll bounce against each other all the time when you work together, if you don't discuss and find out how to bridge it.
And again, openness is very important
in
that regard as well. Coming back to our topic of diversity intelligence, maybe to the end of our little interview here, we have received one question. It might be interesting to look at. So when you engage with companies, do you always start with the executive team, with HR, or does it differ? And do you only work with private companies, or do you also work with government bodies?
Yes. The first question. In a perfect world, we would always start with the executive team and do what we call synchronize them. We want the top management team to be 100% synchronized on what do we actually want to
Yeah.
achieve and how do we get there, right? If they are not aligned, nobody else will be aligned. But I'd say maybe 20% of the times we start working with a new client, we get the chance to start with the top management team. Otherwise, we have to work our way up because it becomes more and more obvious that if we are not all aligned, it won't happen. And it is often, I'd like to say, parked in HR, the diversity agenda and the goals and the strategy. But HR cannot make a cultural transformation alone. So we need to make a full circle. We do work with basically all universities in Denmark. 50% of our activities are outside Denmark, and many in Europe, Germany, France, but also China and US. But in Denmark, we do have some public clients as well, because we see the same mechanisms and dynamics in all over the world, in all
organizations.
Yes.
No matter if they are public or private.
Exactly.
So it's also a topic for public institutions, for government bodies, for administration.
It is. Yeah.
We've got another question coming in here. Good morning, Heidi, Andreas. Very interesting topics covered here. Do you see the difference in the state of digitalization between Denmark and Germany as a relevant factor of how diversity is managed?
If I understand the question, there's an observation from my colleagues last night. They went to a restaurant in Frankfurt and they didn't bring cash. So they had to pay by credit card, which was not possible. So one of the waiters had to use her PayPal, and they would have to transfer money to her. And we experienced that a lot. I don't know if that covers digitalization, but there are some issues here we keep facing with our German clients. We are digitalizing all our services in 2024. So everything we do will...
You at Living Institute.
Us at Living Institute, because we cannot travel to and put what we call a body shop. We put bodies in front of bodies, training them. That's not a sustainable way of working with it. So we are digitalizing everything we have or everything we do. I'm not aware what's going on in Germany, to be honest, if there's the same maturity in companies.
Yeah.
What do you think, Andreas?
It's a good point. It's a good point. I would say that also digital abilities and the level of digitization creates, in a way, diversity and needs to be managed in a way, specifically in international contexts. Because if you have a higher degree of digital abilities on the one side and a lower degree of digital abilities on the other, or willingness, it's not only abilities, but also willingness, then you might also face problems or miscommunication, which is not intended. Maybe that's also an interesting topic to look at. So I think we've reached the end of our coffee with.
Yes.
I'd like to thank you very much, Heidi, for the great discussions that we had. I think it became obviously clear why it is of utmost importance for businesses as well as for government institutions, as we have learned, to talk about diversity management and intelligence, and not only talk about it, but to see how does it affect me? What can I do? How can I benefit by implementing respective measures? And I can only advise, as I've done in the beginning, because I've read through your book, Diversity Intelligence, how to create a culture of inclusion for your business, which could be very interesting for further reading if you are interested. If not, thank you very much for your participation today. Thank you, Heidi, for being here today. And we are very happy to have you back again very soon with another format of the Coffee With. And for more information about our upcoming events, visit handelskammer.dk events. Thank you very much and have a great day.
Thank you.